Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the NPTEL module on strategic trade and protectionism, theories and empirics. This is as part of the MOOC program of the ministry, where many latest aspects of trade and strategies are required to be discussed in detail for holistic learning. So we are having this course particularly to attach number of information pertaining to international trade and number of latest strategies taken up by member countries to restrict their flows of goods and services. So in this context, this is the introduction to the strategic trade and protectionism. Myself, Dr. Pratap C. Mohanty. I am a faculty member at the Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee. So let me have the privilege to explain you the details of strategic trade as an anecdotal explanation to the international trade. We need to have various theories, various facts, various challenges, various cases, then various groups formed by different countries. And what is the structure by which we are following are actually the coverage of this particular lecture. Now, as part of introduction to the strategic trade, I just like to highlight here, based on the World Economic Outlook data published in April 2019, it is very recent data. So this shows that the world trade growth has actually slowed down by roughly around 3% in 2018 due to major trade protectionism, and this is much below to the growth rate of 4.6% in 2017, which is actually caused largely by new and retaliatory tariff measures as mentioned by the World Economic Outlook, and this is also been hampered by the recent trade war between US and China, and other factors like slower economic growth and volatility in financial market. And some other authors mentioned in different writings that it is not just due to these factors, also increasing integration among the member countries really caused the protectionism in a different form, and then the strategies actually raised by the members in integrating their trade among themselves. WEO, World Economic Outlook, also clarifies the fact that trade protectionism actually lead to some forms of diversion to the trade, and this creates lots of imbalances among the member countries. Therefore, those imbalances largely factor in the macroeconomic disturbances. Now, to understand the course, the module as part of the introduction lecture, we must understand some of the factors, some of the conflicting contexts like fallacies of international trade. It says that one fallacy is that all theories, all experts suggested repeatedly, or all the member countries in the different negotiations of WTO repeatedly mentions about reduction of trade that will facilitate international trade and all the country will grow together, but conversely or quite paradoxically all the members are actually imposing restrictions. So, this kind of fallacy is actually which has led to the problems. Then the second point here I am mentioning that those trade policies as advocated in different rounds or different groups that stand to benefit from trade restrictions to the member countries. So, therefore, the groups or the restriction they raise are actually benefiting the member countries. So, this is clearly a fallacy to the international approach theories. And why economists are largely worried about international trade? Because the way strategies or restrictions have been rising over the time under the negotiations of WTO or under the caveat of WTO, these restrictions have been actually multifaceted and very difficult to capture. So, I mean for your example, there are 25,000 cases are actually raised relating to non-tariff barriers by the member countries. Out of that only less than 400 cases are actually taken to the table after validating all its submissions. Then out of 497 cases, only 6 have been discussed, have been solved till the date. Now, imagine how things are moving and how those problems are becoming multifold. So, how to solve it is a bigger challenge to the economist. Now, a myth is that a country with jack of all trade will lead the trade is actually not necessarily true. That was counteracted by some of the theories, especially in comparative advantage framework, and also will emphasize revealed comparative advantage framework to contradict this context. We will talk about certain recent theories accordingly and the factors associated to the explanation of those myths, and certain evidences, examples will be also followed in the due course of our lecture, and their effects in terms of societal welfare, country's welfare, consumers or producer losses can be explained. Rationality behind the data will also be checked. While we said that social and political questions are important, we need to actually check the history of their protectionism. Then only a better answer could be actually attributed. And last sort of our module will follow with the birth of WTO and how it is the instrumental in making the trade more transparent and less restrictive. So, this is the dilemma we have already explained. Now, so our theories largely, let us come back to the theories and empirics accordingly. Our theories will largely talk about the strategic trade and also talk about certain possibility of protectionism based on the theoretical understanding. We will also unfold the discussion for big country versus small country debates in this regard, how big countries are benefited due to import restrictions or tariff, or how small countries should be attached with a big country, so that small countries should always take the advantage. May be the case that small countries not influencing the terms of trade under certain circumstances, but still it is beneficial for the small country to be in trade. Now, as part of the discussion on theory, we will also talk about intra-industry versus inter-industry trade, within the industry and outside industry, or industry with another industry, or within the industry or among the firms, how trade takes place. And this is the debate we will refer to the role of economies of scale of production, and thereby we will talk about monopolistically competitive market, and its role in differentiating products. So, thereby trade takes place, and trade within trade is also important, and this is the present days trade context. And while discussing this, we will also emphasize the the protection, the type of protection, the different forms of protection like tariff, non-tariff barriers. Out of that, which forms of protection is more effective? We will analyze with the help of consumers and producers losses or the net welfare changes to the country, and we will emphasize at the last of the module, as I just said, on trade creation versus trade diversion while forming integration. Some groups are attached with some groups, but it is also cutting off from another groups. So, therefore, there are possibility of creation versus diversion, and in that particular context we will discuss various forms of groups like foreign trade agreement, preferential trade agreement, customs union, common market. So, we will be emphasized on the very last week of our lecture, that is the 8th week of our lecture. We will talk about those aspects in detail. So, here is the map, complete map of our understanding on different theories. Here you look at the classical and how they believe on complete versus incomplete specialization. There is no question of incomplete specialization discussed in classical framework, we will discuss. Similarly, the new theory of trade, especially on the understanding of availability of resources and factor prices, factor price equalization and technological changes, and then economy of scale. Then here we are emphasizing economy of scale, intra-industry argument, where the strategy derived, strategic trade policy actually derived based on this. And therefore, the strategy lead to some forms of interaction among the countries. So, geographical proximity or the multinationals, new goods, growth, their connection, transport cost are quite important in explaining the strategic trade policy or in the context of new trade policy accordingly. So, therefore, this is the one which is very important for explanation. Now, as a quality check of the facts and figure we said or the theories we are going to explain, starting with a case study here. Now, recently as highlighted in 2019 May, US Census Bureau BBC research. So, we are citing the source here to authenticate the discussion that there has been a trade war between US and China, especially on the extent of restriction they raised for their products. Now, to count a few, US tariffs on China, in total it is $250 US billion. So, $250 billion US dollar are actually the tariffs on Chinese product raised by US. The tariffs imposed was in 2018. So, and tariffs threatened by Trump further to the level of 320 billion US dollar. Now, at this moment till 2018 it was up to 250 billion US dollar, whereas the Chinese tariffs on US, China actually retaliated to it also. So, accordingly the 110 billion US dollar imposed in 2018, they have a target actually to make it 120 billion US dollar as China reported. So, now total Chinese goods imported to US in 2018 was 539 billion US dollar. So, now look at who is dependent on whom and how the restrictions are made, and US is deliberately doing it to restrict Chinese imports, Chinese products and their imports to US and to protect their country. So, now let us interpret largely why they are charging, point number 1 why, and what kind of restrictions, and and why retaliation. Then fourth one is what is the theoretical explanation to it, and how India is affected, India in this context, India's case must have been also discussed in our due course of lecture. So, and does partnering with another country or another group is going to reduce the burden on the restrictions made by another country. So, therefore, integration is more important as well to be emphasized. later on. So, now a overview of our course. This portion we are not covering as part of the lecture, we are only covering this much. You go and check my PPT and find out. So, trade theories we will discuss classical mercantilism, Adam Smith absolute cost advantage, comparative cost advantage theory, Hexer-Ohlin theory, where they largely talk about the factory endowment and their differences in trade, and also criticize their theory by certain empirical testing. Then from the comparative advantage theory we will emphasize the opportunity cost of production and the discussion in trade. We will talk about the offer, not the offer curve, offer curve through two dimension, the linear production possibility frontier. Here we will emphasize the increasing cost function that is responsible for differentiating the product, is largely emphasized by economy of scale and imperfectly competitive market. After discussing, there are many other theories are not captured in this diagram, you will find out in the due course of the lectures. And the last part of the lecture is on trade policy and integration. So, tariff, non-tariff barriers, especially especially TBTs, technical barriers to trade, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, and plus RTAs. We will talk about RTAs, regional trading arrangements among the member countries as a strategy for protectionism of their trade. Now, these are the people, these are the experts by which we start the discussion for international trade: Smith, Ricardo and Malthus. So, trade theories is an anecdotal explanation to the international trade. Mercantilism we will discuss. We will discuss in our next next to next lecture, where William Patty, Thomas Moon and Antonio are actually important. In absolute cost advantage theory, Adam Smith is quite he is the father of economics. His theory is the foundation behind the international trade theories as well, whereas in comparative advantage theory, comparative cost advantage have been mapped, and excellently David Ricardo talked about international trade. Now, as part of the modern explanation to the theory, we talked about resources and its explanation emphasized by Hexer and Ohlin, and there are specific factor in income distribution model mentioned by Samuelson and Jones, even in Hexer, Ohlin and Samuelson model, and that is famously known as factor equalization theory. And there is another modern theory mentioned by standard model of trade by Krugman and Opsfeld. And let us take another case to the understanding as reported in the Financial Express here in 2016 December 16, and especially here we will talk about the revealed comparative advantage in one of the module of our lecture on the understanding of strategic trade. So, where the emphasis on should India be worried on Chinese growth or Chinese or rather trade between or the trade war between US and China, or simply the Chinese growth. Now, with the contribution of Balasag's revealed comparative advantage theory, I must mention here that India should not worry, because of the fact that though comparatively in US has huge China has huge advantage. China has huge advantage in manufacturing goods for comparative advantage front as well as in revealed comparative advantage stage China as compared to India. So, there are different in all other components. Look at all other components like food items, agriculture and raw materials, fuels, ore, metals and precious metals etc., or precious stones etc. From 1990 till 2014 data is reported in Financial Express that India has advantages, revealed comparative advantages. So, therefore, with the rise in China is not going to create any further threat to Indian context. So, therefore, it is not problematic, and India should be cautious and may be cautious in one of the field, especially in manufacturing product or manufacturing case. And as you all know, Indian government has already started a number of steps, especially for Make in India program, and this was the original catchphrase in China 10 years back, where they talked about make in China model. So India has been trying its best to actually have manufacturing base of many products. Now let us have the discussion of the theories once again in a diagram. So here in this color we are discussing mercantilism in one of the lectures. Then in another lecture we will have absolute cost advantage theory by Adam Smith. Then there are some of the implications, how should there be trade, should it be mutually beneficial. So what are the problems of absolute cost advantage could be discussed. Then the theory of competitive advantage would also be taken off, where fixed proportions and increasing fixed cost function and increasing opportunity cost function will be emphasized. When it is increasing cost function, the production possibility frontier which I am going to use it in one of the lecture, and you can clarify accordingly, will be actually non-linear and concave to the origin, and that has led to that leads to incomplete specialization. Whereas in case of fixed opportunity cost or constant opportunity cost, we have complete specialization because we have a corner solution, and these answers you will get it from the respective lecture series, and you check our schedule and also the respective questions in each of the week lecture or week module, you will find out the better understanding of each of the context. So there each of the theories suggests that gains from trade and gains from specialization are two important aspects of the theory. So far as the new classical theories are concerned or the modern theories are concerned, we largely refer to Hexarollin model, and that is purely based on factor availability or the resource availability, and also the famous word called factor endowment that can be explained through factor intensity or factor abundance. This is clearly highlighted in that particular lecture, and it suggests that higher the resources, higher the endowment you have, higher the possibility of specialization and minimizing the cost, and therefore there will be trade. Okay, so Hexarollin model is very important. Now certainly it is based on certain assumptions, you must check it accordingly. Now so this has led to two interpretations. One is called factor price equalization theorem, which says that wage rate in one lead to wage rate in another, and interest rate in one lead to equalization of interest rate in another, W1 equal to W2 and R1 equal to R2. Whereas as highlighted by Stolper-Samuelson theory, that W1 not just equal to W1 W2, wage rate in one country will be equalized with wage rate in another country. Instead of that that will be happening, plus it will equalize across the firms, like W1 will be equalized with R1 and W2 will be equalized with R2. So therefore there will be factor price equalization, but emphasized in different format. So in new trade theory, especially the role of economy of scale and its connection to international trade strategies, where the economy of scale is important, and increasing economy of scale which caused the monopolization of the product and differentiation of product lead to certain forms of imperfections in the market, and therefore that will cause intra-industry trade instead of inter-industry. All previous theories have been emphasizing on inter-industry framework to explain the international trade. So, therefore this theory is little new, and it integrated more to explain the intra-industry trade or trade within the industry. And so accordingly various interpretations are made, and how outsourcing or offshoring are actually one of the strategies made by different member countries or different countries to harness the benefits of economy of scale, will be taken off in one of the module, one of the week of the lectures. Then we also emphasize partial equilibrium set off as compared to general equilibrium set off. So here we will take the help of offer curve or simple demand and supply diagram to understand whether the approach lead to complete specialization or incomplete specialization. Now here the module specifically on tariffs, and tariff in the context of small country, there are types, small country, large country, and implications on them, especially on consumers, producers, government revenue. then trade effect, then how it distributes income to the small country and large country will be taken up. And the relating to the tariff, another one is called non-tariff barriers, like recently discussed. I mean, in the present day debates on TBT and SPS, it is not mentioned. You can write down technical barriers to trade and SPS are the recent restrictions raised by different member countries, and different cases are observed. Import quota, export subsidy, voluntary export restraint, technical subsidies, dumping, etc., are part of the discussion of non-tariff barriers. And last but not the least aspect of international, strategic trade and protectionism aspect is through WTO, World Trade Organization, or the formation of customs union. There are different types of customs union would be emphasized: preferential trading agreement, free trade area, customs union, common market or common union would be also discussed in detail. So, now while we discuss this, we will be certainly interested in identifying the one context called trade creation versus trade diversion. So, trade creating strategies versus trade diverting strategies, or the membership among the countries actually lead to some forms of creation versus diversion. Whether diversion creates net welfare or positively or negatively can be also identified, and accordingly a theory of second best was also emphasized. We will take off in the last week of the module. Now, having said all those discussions, I think it is always important that how to have a balance, how to take support. Here is the person who is saying the third party to be attached. Now, within the country, members, entrepreneurs, government connection, international community, banks or other community in the context are very important, and we have discussed. So, certain other examples like cases for trade diversion are observed. 250 American companies, it has been observed that India has opened conversation with over 250 American companies that are exploring a shift in manufacturing operation from China as part of the discussion of trade war. Now, it is recently debated and discussed in many newspaper highlighted the China plus one. Now, if you have manufacturing base in China, add another one plus one, because China is not dependable that much in international trade discussion. Now, especially Samsung case, I think I have already mentioned here. Under this strategy, business started shifted to Vietnam largely and Thailand from mainland China, and these two Southeast Asian nations have attracted free trade agreements for third country exports. Especially the case of Samsung operating from Vietnam a few years ago, and today contributes significantly to the country's gross domestic product. These markets in Southeast Asian countries are actually very small, and India's attraction is because of its huge market and growing of its middle class. This is India's chance in history and must tap as early as possible. So, even as I discussed, large number of distortions taken place, especially for the supply side distortions are made due to oil prices, and many other restrictions are made by forming groups. And famous example of forming group is OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And these developments increase the vulnerability of external sector of emerging markets, especially India, and there have been many other instances where consumption shifted, production shifted. Accordingly, strategies are actually developed by the member countries. Now, among the major economies running current account deficit, India is the largest foreign exchange reserve holders and 8th largest among all countries of the world. So, so it is the largest holder, so therefore, we are not be worried so much. India has signed actually 28 multilateral or bilateral agreements as per the recent trend discussed. India is the 7th largest economy in terms of gross domestic product in terms of US US dollar. Then it is the fastest growing major economy. As for the average growth rate of India was not only higher than China during 1415 to 1718, but also higher than that of other top major economies in the world. In terms of purchasing power parity calculation or adjustment, India's GDP in dollar terms is actually third ranked in the world. This is highlighted here, all those figures I said is third ranked in the world. Now similarly, the facts I have said is highlighted here, India's actually growth rate in terms of real GDP. Now this is the external sector over different period, you can follow it off. Now merchandise exports actually it is in positive, merchandise imports is more than that of the exports, therefore we have current account deficit, therefore it is negative, and other figures are important. Reserve especially is the 8th, reserves I have already said here that it is the 8th largest among all the countries in the world. We have largest foreign exchange reserves, and it is highlighted here as well. Now these are the figures from latest economic survey 2018-19, and regarding international comparison of current account balance, India India especially having negative current account balance. Emerging and developing economies are also usually have, in the recent years they have also negative balance of payments figures, but the advanced countries has positive one. Checking with the import restrictions as per the 2017 UNCTAD data, in 2017 very restrictive areas are actually India, it is highlighted in the deep green color, and you can easily find out. And similarly for the non-tariff barriers, as I said, we will have 7th week lecture on it, that US is actually restricting more than 800 items, whereas nearly half of that actually restricted by India, then followed by Russia. So last one to be discussed as a checkpoint for our understanding in the very beginning of the strategic trade lecture is related to the dispute cases raised by the member countries vis-a-vis India to solve the cases. Now here a case is here mentioned that red is highlighted as number of complaints raised by India related to the disputes or non-tariff barriers or the restrictions. Green are the complaint raised by other countries, and India is actually negotiating it and trying to solve it. So as a complainant India there are 24 cases, as a respondent India there are 31 cases or complaint imposed on India's products or the restrictions. As a third party it is 160. Now another case to be attached here as part of international trade discussion, especially on strategic trade and protectionism aspect in the very beginning lecture, that recently the WTO negotiations could able to solve a complaint raised by Bangladesh. See music band called Miles. We will have these details in our last week of the module, and the band called Miles actually raised a complaint in the WTO forum that Indian movie and the song composer Anu Malik in that particular movie Murder has actually copied a song. And so that again in due course of during that course of time, the Bangladeshi composer again consulted with various experts of WTO, and they discussed with various member countries, and finally it was agreed that this is a clear violation of copyright as part of the TRIPS, trade related intellectual property rights. So this was under the TRIPS segment where music composition, music details related songs and their copy, only 8 channels by which copy can be made for different songs or their music, but not more than that. Actually in India in that context actually violated, as highlighted by different newspapers. And finally Bangladesh won the case, and that was a clear case out of the 6 disputed case solved. So that was one of the most important case as an example of the role of WTO and settling the disputes of the member countries as part of the strategic and protectionism framework. So therefore we have learned many aspects in the very introduction. We will expect all those details and their justification in their respective sessions. So therefore I will suggest everyone to mark each of the words of mine as I discussed in the introduction lecture and try to clarify in their respective one. So, I hope it gives a illuminating ideas of strategic trade and protectionism, and rest will follow in the respective lectures. With this, I think I should close here. Thank you.